Chapter 1. Daily Life in the Middle Ages. Come with me now on a time machine back to the Middle Ages. Picture a typical day in the life of an ordinary person. Let's take a moment to explore what daily life might have been like during those times. It's daybreak and the sun is just beginning to peek over the horizon. You awaken in your modest dwelling, a small cottage made of wattle and daub or stone, depending upon where in medieval Europe you lived. For most people, their first concern will be the necessities of nature, but sanitation was not a centralized process, and the disposal of human waste was an individual or communal responsibility. In urban areas, waste was frequently disposed of directly into the streets or open sewers if the town had them. And indoor plumbing, well, that was a luxury reserved for the wealthy. Your next thought is breakfast, but your appetite isn't huge after all those late-night shenanigans. You and your family members wash up quickly with a cloth and water, for a bath would be a rare treat. Lye-based soap is used for cleaning, but its strong alkali can be a skin irritant. Perfumes were popular and included things like lavender and rose. But for most folks, personal hygiene was a secondary concern. You dress quickly, pulling on a tunic, a basic knee-length shirt-like garment common to both men and women. Depending on the season, you might add a cloak or a hood. Your footwear, if you choose to wear any, consists of simple leather shoes or boots. For most of the year, however, many went barefoot. The morning is filled with chores. The fields need tending, crops must be planted and harvested, animals require care. Medieval agriculture was intensive, requiring long hours of labor. The quality of life for the peasant class, who constituted about 80% of the population, depended on the success of the harvest. If your lord chose to hold court nearby, you may be called upon to provide agricultural products as taxes. Before long, it's time for lunch, but provisions are sparse. You and your family dig into a pot of pottage, a thick soup made of oats or barley, cabbage, onions, and other vegetables. Legumes were sometimes added for extra protein. Meat enters the picture only occasionally and usually comes from domesticated fowl or pork. Beef is a rare treat. Bread, often made from rye or barley flour, is a staple and a primary source of calories. The absence of vitamins and minerals in these foods leads to widespread malnutrition, especially among children. Rickets, a disease marked by soft and weak bones, and scurvy, which causes bleeding gums and tooth loss, are common ailments. As the afternoon wears on, you might take a break from your labors to visit the local tavern for some liquid refreshment. Ale and cider are common beverages, but wine, though enjoyed by peasants, is generally associated with the nobility and the clergy. Entertainment in medieval taverns could include music, dancing, or storytelling. Sports and games also feature prominently in tavern culture and include dice games, card games, and chess. The sun begins its slow descent towards the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. It's time to return home and tend to your evening responsibilities. Once the dinner dishes are cleared away, the family might engage in some light entertainment before retiring for the night. Now imagine yourself as part of the elite ruling class. Your world is one of privilege and power. While the common folk eke out a living in the fields or as artisans, you live a life of relative luxury. Your days are filled with the pursuit of pleasure and the exercise of authority. Hunting is a favorite pastime, and you take great pride in your skills with the bow and arrow or the lance. The thrill of the chase is matched only by the joy of a sumptuous feast. You dine on delicacies like roasted boar, venison, and peacock, washed down with goblets of fine wine. Your table is laden with spices and exotic fruits, a testament to the riches of your realm. Life expectancy for the upper classes was slightly higher than that of the peasantry, hovering around 40 years. But no matter the social standing, few Europeans lived beyond the age of 35 due to rampant diseases. These include dysentery, an intestinal infection causing severe diarrhea, smallpox, a viral disease resulting in high fever and pustular eruptions, and influenza, a respiratory infection leading to chills, fever, and aches. However, there is one disease that towers above all others in terms of mortality: the Black Death, also known as the bubonic plague. Reaching Europe in 1347, this devastating pandemic is believed to have killed between 30 and 60% of the population. Medieval European society was highly stratified and followed a strict hierarchy. At the top stood the king, the ultimate authority, followed by the nobility, the royal elite who held vast tracts of land and wielded significant power. Below them were the clergy, the spiritual leaders who played a pivotal role in medieval life. The vast majority of people, however, were peasants, an agricultural working class tied to the land they inhabited. This system, known as feudalism, bound peasants to their lords, obliging them to provide labor and goods in exchange for protection. And that brings us to the end of another day in the Middle Ages. As darkness descends, you seek the warmth of your bedchamber, the curtains drawn against the chill night air. Sleep comes easily, offering a respite from the toil and hardship of daily life. But as you slumber, the relentless march of time continues, bringing with it both challenges and changes that will shape the course of history. Hey, check out all of our social media channels for more information about the series. And don't forget to subscribe for new episodes every week. Thanks for watching. Chapter 2. The Reign of Catherine the Great-born Sophie Friedrich August von Anhalt-Zerbst. On May 2nd, 1729, in Stettin, Prussia, Catherine the Great's journey to the Russian throne was a carefully calculated process that involved marriage, manipulation, and a well-executed coup. Once in power, she embarked on a series of administrative, legal, and territorial expansions that left an indelible mark on Russia's history. This chapter will explore the rise, reign, and impact of one of Russia's most iconic rulers. In 1745, 16-year-old Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst found herself in St. Petersburg, preparing to marry the heir to the Russian throne, Grand Duke Peter. The match was strategically arranged by the two ruling powers, Russia and Prussia, to cement their alliance. But it would be a union forged not just for diplomatic benefit, but for personal ambition. For Sophie harbored dreams far beyond the role of a ducal wife. She wanted the crown. Russia in the early 18th century was a land of vast potential, overshadowed by the shortcomings of its current leadership. Peter the Great's recent death had placed his son, the future Peter III, on the throne, but the young monarch lacked the maturity and acumen of his father. It was a situation Sophie recognized, and she wasted no time in positioning herself for influence. She immersed herself in Russian language and culture, shedding her German origins and embracing orthodoxy. She took on the name Catherine, a moniker that would echo through history. Her marriage to Peter proved to be a pivotal moment, not just for personal reasons, but because it gave her entry into the inner workings of the Russian court. Yet this royal union was far from a fairy tale. Peter and Catherine had a tumultuous relationship marked by physical abuse and mutual distrust. Peter's erratic behavior and pro-Prussian leanings further strained their bond. It was a toxic environment that pushed Catherine into a corner, forcing her to forge alliances with key figures at court, notably the influential and powerful Vorontsov family. By 1762, Catherine's patient maneuvering had borne fruit. A group of influential nobles, recognizing Catherine's potential as empress and sensing Peter's unfitness to rule, orchestrated a coup. On July 9th, they deposed Peter III, ending his brief reign and placing Catherine on the throne. The deposed Peter, who had sought refuge in the nearby Oranienbaum Palace, was forced to abdicate in favor of Catherine. After detaining Peter, the conspirators, led by Catherine's lover, Gregory Orlov, brought him to Rapsha, where he died under mysterious circumstances. Officially, the cause of death was a hemorrhage, but rumors persist that he was murdered. With the coup successfully executed, Catherine the Great became the Empress of Russia. Her journey from a minor German noble to the ruler of a vast empire was a testament to her ambition, intelligence, and adaptability. But as she ascended to the throne, she knew that her legitimacy would be challenged, especially considering that her husband Peter still lived. So it was imperative that she took swift and decisive action to secure her position. Her strategy was threefold. First, she moved to quell any potential rebellions within the Russian nobility, the class that held considerable power in Russia at the time. To achieve this, she enacted a series of reforms that granted them more rights and privileges, effectively co-opting their power. Second, she solidified her control over the military, ensuring that the armed forces remained loyal to her. By promoting her own supporters within the military hierarchy, she minimized the risk of a coup. And third, she cultivated an image of a God-given ruler. She projected an aura of divine right to rule, legitimizing her claim to the throne in the eyes of the populace. Catherine's efforts paid off. Her reign, which lasted for 34 years, was one of the longest in Russian history. During this extended tenure, she embarked on ambitious projects that reshaped Russia's political, social, and territorial landscape. One such project was the codification of Russian laws. In 1767, she convened the Legislative Commission, a body tasked with the monumental job of compiling and streamlining Russia's scattered and outdated laws. Despite being the largest legislative project in Russian history, it was ultimately dissolved by Catherine in 1768 without producing a comprehensive legal code. Although the commission failed to complete its main objective, it did have some lasting impacts. For instance, it led to the creation of the first ever criminal trial procedure in Russia. Another significant undertaking during Catherine's reign was the Charter to the Nobility issued in 1785. This document formalized the rights and privileges of the Russian aristocracy, including hereditary nobility, exemption from most taxes, and the right to own serfs. By solidifying the rights of the nobility, Catherine aimed to secure their support for her rule while also curtailing their potential for rebellion. A parallel reform effort focused on the secularization of church lands. Catherine, aiming to increase state revenue and decrease the influence of the Orthodox Church, initiated the process of transferring church property to state control. This policy, however, was more of a long-term goal than an immediate reform, and its full implementation was only realized after Catherine's death. While Catherine's domestic policies aimed at restructuring and centralizing power, her foreign policy was equally ambitious, geared towards territorial expansion. Her reign saw two major conflicts with the Ottoman Empire: the First Russo-Turkish War from 1768 to 1774, and the Second Russo-Turkish War from 1787 to 1792. The First War arose from Russia's desire to expand its Black Sea holdings, a goal that was also part of a larger European conflict known as the 7 Years' War, with the backing of European allies. Catherine intervened in Ottoman-controlled Crimea, aiming to open up new trade routes to the Black Sea. The war resulted in a decisive victory for Russia, culminating in the Treaty of Kukla-Kainarka in 1774. The treaty not only granted Russia territory in Crimea and on the northern shores of the Black Sea, but also allowed Russia to take over any Orthodox Church in the Ottoman Empire. This victory solidified Russia's status as a major player in the Black Sea region and set the stage for further expansion. The Second Russo-Turkish War was triggered by the deteriorating relationship between Russia and the Ottomans. Fueled by competing territorial ambitions, Catherine, driven by her long-held goal of gaining access to the Mediterranean Sea, declared war. The war was marked by significant Russian victories, including the Battle of Kagel and the Battle of Sokolov. The conflict finally concluded with the Treaty of Yassy in 1792. which awarded Russia additional territories in Ukraine, Crimea, and the Caucasus region. These territorial gains made Russia a major force in the Black Sea and Eastern European regions. Beyond the Ottoman conflicts, Catherine's reign saw Russia's involvement in the partitions of Poland. Over 3 partitions in 1772, 1793, and 1795, Russia, in conjunction with Prussia and Austria, divided the weakened Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Russia gained significant territories, including parts of Ukraine and Belarus, further expanding its size and influence. By the end of Catherine's reign, the Russian Empire had grown by approximately 200,000 square miles. This territorial growth not only showcased Russia's increasing power on the European stage, but also provided Catherine with a legacy that secured her place in history. Catherine the Great's political ideals were deeply rooted in the Enlightenment. She was a patron of the arts and sciences and corresponded with prominent thinkers of her time, including Voltaire and Diderot. She believed in the power of education and established schools and universities across the vast expanse of her empire. However, Catherine's policies were not always in line with her enlightened ideals. For instance, her response to the Pugachev's rebellion in 1773 to 1775 was brutal and uncompromising. The rebellion, led by the charismatic Cossack leader Yemelyan Pugachev, was a challenge to Catherine's authority and the institution of serfdom. Catherine's forceful suppression of the uprising, which involved torture and executions, demonstrated that she was willing to be autocratic when it suited her purpose. Despite the contradictions in her rule, Catherine the Great remains a pivotal figure in Russian history. Her contributions to the expansion of Russia, both in terms of territory and administrative structure, laid the foundation for Russia's emergence as a major power in the 19th century. Her patronage of the arts and sciences contributed significantly to the cultural landscape of her time. Catherine died on November 17, 179, leaving behind a legacy that continues to be debated and analyzed. Her story serves as a reminder of the complexities of historical figures and the multifaceted nature of their contributions and actions. In conclusion, Catherine the Great's journey from a minor German princess to the Empress of Russia was a remarkable feat of ambition and strategic maneuvering. Her reign was marked by significant territorial expansions, administrative reforms, and cultural patronage. While her legacy is complex and cannot be divorced from the realities of her time, including the continuation of serfdom, her contributions to Russian history are undeniable. As we continue to explore the rich tapestry of Russian history, Catherine's story serves as a reminder of the powerful forces that shape empires and the individuals who rise to lead them. Today, we are headed back to the ancient Maya civilization of Palenque, located in what is now southern Mexico. We are going to be talking about the mysterious burial of a middle-aged woman who was covered in a thick layer of red powder when archaeologists unearthed her coffin. What was the significance of this strange discovery? Was she an ordinary woman of status or something more sinister? Join me as we dive into the details of this fascinating case and see what secrets it holds. Chapter 3: The Red Queen. The tomb of the Red Queen was discovered on May 30th, 1994, by Mexican archaeologist Fanny Lopez Jimenez. This remarkable find took place within the confines of Temple 13 at the ancient Maya city of Palenque. The temple itself was constructed during the late Classic period between 750 and 950 CE. At its peak, the city of Palenque was a thriving hub of Mayan culture, boasting impressive architectural structures, including 6 major temples and 3 palaces. However, its glory days came to an end around 950 CE due to a combination of droughts, political conflicts, and a decline in trade. Over time, the city was abandoned and left in ruins. Archaeologist Lorenzo Lizarraga, who led the team that discovered the Red Queen's tomb in 1994, had been exploring Temple 13 for several years before his team stumbled upon the hidden burial chamber. He was excavating the site as part of a larger project to restore the temple when his team made this incredible discovery. The tomb was found beneath a stairway leading to the top of the pyramid. As he and his team uncovered the tomb, they were surprised to find that it wasn't quite what they were expecting. The burial chamber was unusually small, measuring just 2.8 meters by 1.9 meters. It was also filled with hundreds of offerings and treasures, which indicated that the person buried there must have been of high importance. Inside the tomb, they discovered a sarcophagus made from limestone. Archaeologists carefully opened it to reveal a skeleton that appeared to be that of a middle-aged woman. The woman was thought to be around 40 to 50 years old at the time of her death, according to osteological analysis of her remains. But that's not all that was inside the tomb. The woman's body had been completely covered in a thick layer of red cinnabar powder, a form of mercury sulfide, HGS. This striking find gave her the moniker, the Red Queen, by the media. But the reason behind this unusual practice has been debated ever since. One popular theory suggests that the cinnabar was used as a symbol of the wearer's high status, as it was a rare and valuable commodity at the time. However, this explanation doesn't hold up to much scrutiny, as there is no evidence that the Maya associated cinnabar with wealth or power. In fact, the only other examples of cinnabar use in the Maya world are from burial contexts, suggesting that it may have had a different meaning. Some researchers believe that the red powder may have been used as a way to preserve the body, as it was commonly used in Mesoamerican cultures for its antiseptic properties. But this theory is also not supported by evidence, as there is no indication that the cinnabar was used in this way in Palenque. Instead, the most likely explanation for the Red Queen as Crimson Makeover is that it was meant to protect her on her journey to the afterlife. According to Maya mythology, the dead had to travel through a dangerous underworld on their way to the afterlife, and they believed that the cinnabar could ward off evil spirits that might try to harm them along the way. This belief was common in many Mesoamerican cultures, and the Maya were known to have adopted similar beliefs from their neighbors to the south, the Aztec. But the mystery doesn't end there. The Red Queen's tomb also contained a number of other interesting artifacts, including a jade pendant in the shape of a bat, which may have been a representation of the god of the underworld. Additionally, the discovery of incense burners and a tripod suggests that the Maya believed that the deceased would require sustenance on their journey, just like any long journey. These findings indicate that the Maya had a complex understanding of the afterlife, and their rituals surrounding death were elaborate and meaningful. They believed that the journey to the afterlife was fraught with danger and required the deceased to be prepared with offerings and protection to ensure their safe passage. The identity of the Red Queen herself is still unknown, although some researchers have speculated that she may have been a member of the royal court. However, this is just a guess, and there is no evidence to support it. It is possible that she was an ordinary woman who simply held great importance in the eyes of her family. Unfortunately, the lack of a name or title leaves us with more questions than answers. But one thing is certain, her burial was a significant event in the ancient Maya city of Palenque. While the Red Queen's tomb was an incredible discovery in itself, it was only one of many fascinating finds at the ancient city of Palenque. The city was once home to a powerful dynasty of Maya rulers who left behind a rich legacy of art, architecture, and culture. One of the most famous rulers was Paco the Great, who reigned from 615 to 683 CE. His accomplishments included the construction of the impressive Temple of the Inscriptions, where his tomb was later discovered. Paco's legacy has been immortalized in the stunning sarcophagus that housed his remains. Carved from solid stone, it depicts the ruler riding a mythical creature known as the feathered serpent, symbolizing his connection to the divine. Another highlight of Palenque is the palace, a sprawling complex that served as the residence of the Maya nobility. Its intricate carvings and beautiful courtyards provide a glimpse into the daily life of the Maya elite. The city's many temples, including the Temple of the Sun and the Temple of the Moon, are equally impressive. These structures are not only architectural marvels, but also astronomical observatories that align with the cardinal points of the compass and track the movements of celestial bodies. In addition to these major attractions, Palenque is home to numerous other archaeological sites, including a ball court, a cemetery, and a number of smaller temples and palaces. Each of these places offers a unique window into the Maya civilization and their contributions to human history. For anyone interested in ancient cultures, archaeology, or just history in general, the ancient city of Palenque is a must-visit destination. Its well-preserved ruins, lush surroundings, and fascinating artifacts make it one of the most captivating archaeological sites in the world. Whether you're an avid traveler or a stay-at-home history buff, you can experience the magic of Palenque for yourself through virtual tours and online resources. So why not take a journey back in time and explore the wonders of this ancient city today? Who knows? You may just discover something that sheds new light on the mysteries of the past. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey to the ancient Maya city of Palenque. I hope you enjoyed learning about the fascinating discovery of the Red Queen and the secrets surrounding her mysterious burial. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and let me know what you thought of today's episode in the comments section below. Your feedback is incredibly important to me and helps me create more engaging and educational content for you. If you want to learn more about the ancient Maya or other fascinating historical topics, check out some of my other videos. With that said, I want to wish you all the best and hope you have a wonderful day. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the mysteries of our past. In today's video, we're going to talk about the discovery of the tomb of the Red Queen of Palenque. This is an archaeological site in Mexico. In 2015, archaeologists announced that they had discovered the tomb of the Red Queen of Palenque. Let's find out more about it. The discovery was made by a team of archaeologists from the National Autonomous University of Mexico who were excavating at the site of Palenque in the Mexican state of Chiapas. The ancient city of Palenque was a major center of the classic Maya civilization located in what is now the Mexican state of Chiapas. It flourished from the 3rd to the 8th century ND and was ruled by a dynasty of Maya kings. The team was excavating at the site of the 13th tomb within the so-called North Acropolis when they came across the burial chamber. The tomb was filled with offerings and artifacts that had been placed there over a 4-year period. The archaeologists carefully removed hundreds of objects, including jadeite, a diadem made of 16 beads of jade and malachite, a necklace of river pearls and rings that had been placed on the fingers of the dead woman. Archaeologists believe that the quality and quantity of the grave goods indicate that the woman buried here had a very high status. The tomb also contained 2 human remains. They were found outside the sarcophagus, which suggests that they may have been the retainers or servants of the queen. These individuals had been killed and sacrificed before the tomb was sealed. Their bodies were then placed outside the entrance to serve as bodyguards for the queen in the afterlife. The archaeologists used a variety of scientific methods to try to identify the remains, but these efforts have so far been unsuccessful. DNA analysis was unable to establish a familial relationship with Crackle, the most famous ruler of Palenque, despite the fact that he was the only male member of the royal family buried within the city as boundaries. This suggests that the Red Queen may have belonged to a different royal line. To date, no written sources have mentioned the existence of a powerful woman at Palenque, though a Maya vase painting depicts a female ruler wearing the insignia of royalty. Some scholars believe that she may have been the partner of Pakal, who was known to have harems of both male and female lovers. Others believe that she may have been his mother or sister. However, these are just speculations and nothing more concrete has emerged. Until recently, the role of women in classic Maya society was largely unknown because most of what we know about them comes from male perspectives. Male rulers commissioned monuments and built grand architecture to glorify their achievements and those of their ancestors. As a result, many of our sources are biased and do not give us a true picture of how women lived. However, the discovery of the Red Queen's tomb is helping to change this. The burial itself is evidence of the high status enjoyed by royal women during the classic Maya period. In addition to the quality and quantity of the grave goods, the location of the tomb is also significant. It was found beneath the floor of one of Palenque's most important temples, suggesting that the queen was seen as a divine figure who was worthy of being entombed in such a sacred space. Unfortunately, the tomb had been robbed in ancient times. The grave robbers had removed the valuables and left behind only a few scraps of the queen's once magnificent burial garments. However, these fragments are still providing valuable insights into the rituals and beliefs of the classic Maya. For example, the grave goods suggest that the queen was buried with items that would have helped her on her journey through the underworld. The malachite, a green stone that was associated with life and rebirth, was likely meant to help her navigate the dangerous underworld and emerge successfully on the other side. In conclusion, the discovery of the tomb of the Red Queen is an important one. It is helping to fill in our knowledge of the classic Maya and the role that women played in their society. The artifacts that were recovered from the tomb are providing valuable insights into the rituals and beliefs of the classic Maya, and the quality and quantity of the grave goods suggest that the woman buried here was a member of the royal family. Although her identity has not been conclusively established, she will likely prove to be an important figure in classic Maya history. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe. Chapter 4: The Development of the Steam Engine. In the previous chapter, we saw how the energy in coal was being utilized to power the Industrial Revolution. But how did the first steam engines work? We can trace the roots of the steam engine back to many sources. The Greeks were experimenting with steam-powered devices as early as the 1st century AD. One Greek inventor named Hero of Alexandria created what is now called an eolipile, which is also known as a steam turbine. A ball-bearing globe was set spinning inside of a hollow sphere. Water was boiled inside the sphere, which created steam that escaped through two nozzles on the side of the sphere. The steam exiting the nozzles created thrust that spun the globe. While this was an amazing feat of engineering and the first recorded steam-powered device, it wasn't very practical because there was no way to control its speed or output. In fact, there wasn't any practical application for this invention. It was more of a toy or a curiosity. The next developments in steam power didn't come until about 1500 years later during the Renaissance. During this time, scientists began exploring the idea of using steam to do useful work. They were inspired by the observation that steam could be used to power simple machines like pistons and pumps. But it wasn't until the late 17th century when the first practical steam engine was developed. Thomas Savery was an English military engineer who invented the first practical steam engine. He received a patent for his invention in 1698, and he named his invention the miner's friend. This device was designed to pump water out of coal mines. But before we get into how this engine worked, let's look at why it was needed in the first place. As the demand for coal increased during the Industrial Revolution, miners were forced to dig deeper and deeper into the ground. And as they went deeper, they encountered more and more water. This was a problem because water would accumulate in the mines and it would make them unsafe. If water filled up a mine, It could cause a flood, and it could also lead to explosions of fire damp or marsh gas. Fire damp is a mixture of gases that's found in coal mines. It consists mostly of methane and carbon dioxide, but it also contains some nitrogen and other gases. Fire damp is formed when coal is broken down by bacteria and other microorganisms. When it comes into contact with air, it can form explosive mixtures. In fact, some of the worst mining disasters in history have been caused by fire damp explosions. The most famous example is probably the disaster at the Corno du Plan in 1906. In this disaster, a buildup of fire damp exploded, and it killed over 350 miners. So it's not surprising that anything that could remove water from a coal mine was very desirable. That's where Thomas Savery's invention came in. His steam engine was able to pump water out of mines, and it did this by harnessing the power of steam. But before we get into the details of how his engine worked, we need to understand something about how steam is created. When water is heated, it turns into steam. This process is called evaporation. As the temperature of the water increases, it evaporates more quickly. When the water reaches its boiling point, it evaporates very quickly. That's why we see steam coming off of a boiling pot of water. All of this steam is created by the heat from the fire. When the steam rises and comes into contact with the cooler air, it condenses back into liquid water. That's why we see clouds in the sky. They're made up of condensed water vapor. Now that we know how steam is created, we can go back to Thomas Savery's invention. His steam engine was actually a steam pump, and it was the first device that used condensing steam to create a vacuum. A vacuum is a space that has very little or no air in it. When we put a lid on a pot of boiling water, we create a vacuum. Because the steam can't escape, the water boils less vigorously. This happens because the weight of the atmosphere pushes down on the surface of the water. If there's no air pushing down on the surface of the water, it seems like there is a force pulling it away. This force is called suction. Suction is the ability of a liquid to pull itself up against gravity. That's why we can suck water up a straw. We're using our lungs to create a vacuum in our mouth, which creates suction that pulls the water up the straw. Thomas Savery used this principle to create the first practical steam engine. His engine consisted of a vertical cylinder that had a piston in it. The cylinder was connected to a pump that pumped water out of a mine. Here's how it worked. Water was boiled in the cylinder, which created steam. The steam pushed the piston up, and then the steam was released into a condenser. The condenser was a separate chamber that was kept cool. As the steam cooled, it turned back into liquid water. This created a partial vacuum in the cylinder. The water in the cylinder was then forced up through a pipe to a tank. This tank was located above the cylinder, and it was called a head tank. The head tank allowed the water to flow back into the cylinder. The water flowed back into the cylinder because of the lower pressure in the cylinder compared to the head tank. Once the water reached the head tank, it was pumped out of the mine, so the whole cycle started over again. This was a very ingenious design, and it was the first steam engine that could pump water out of a mine. However, it had several problems. The first problem was that it had a low lift height. This means that it couldn't pump water very high. It could only pump water about 100 feet up. This wasn't very useful because many mines were much deeper than 100 feet. The second problem was that it was prone to boiler explosions. This happened because the steam pressure would build up too much, and it would cause the boiler to explode. Both of these problems limited the usefulness of the steam engine. After seeing Savery's invention, Thomas Newcomen thought that he could improve upon it, so he started working on his own steam engine. In 1712, he built the first commercially successful steam engine. Like Savery's engine, it was used to pump water out of mines. It also had a piston and cylinder, but it operated in a slightly different way. Instead of using condensing steam to create a vacuum, Newcomen's engine used atmospheric pressure. To understand how this worked, we need to take a closer look at how Savory's engine worked. When the steam was released into the condenser, it created a partial vacuum in the cylinder. This allowed the water in the cylinder to rise up and push the piston up, but it also allowed air to enter the cylinder. When the air entered the cylinder, it pushed the piston back down. What Newcomen did was to replace the condenser with a second cylinder that had a piston in it. The second cylinder was called an air cylinder. When the steam was released into the air cylinder, it pushed the piston in that cylinder up. This moved the beam up and down, which in turn moved the pump to pump the water out of the mine. Then cold water was sprayed into the main cylinder to condense the steam and force the piston down. This was an atmospheric engine, meaning that it operated at a relatively low pressure. This was good because it meant that the engine was safe to operate. It also meant that the engine was simple and cheap to build. However, it also meant that the engine wasn't very powerful. Despite its limitations, the Newcomen engine was a huge success. It was the first steam engine that could pump water out of mines. It was also the first engine that could be used to generate electricity. In 1784, a man named John Smeaton converted a Newcomen engine to generate electricity. This was done by connecting a generator to the crankshaft of the engine. This allowed the engine to power a variety of machines, including pumps, saws, and even a printing press. Although the steam engine was not the first machine to harness the power of steam, it was the first machine that could be used to do useful work. It was also the first machine that could be used to power other machines. The steam engine is one of the most important inventions in history. It was the driving force behind the Industrial Revolution, and it changed the world forever. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and leave a comment below. And if you want to learn more about the Industrial Revolution, check out the links in the description. Thanks for watching. In 1763, Scottish engineer James Watt made an improvement to the steam engine that changed the world forever. Now, if you're wondering what was so special about this steam engine, it's because it wasn't the first. The first crude steam engines had been created nearly 50 years earlier by Hero of Alexandria, around 130 AD, and throughout the intervening centuries, various engineers had tinkered with them, eventually developing a workable atmospheric engine capable of pumping water out of mines. This machine, invented by Thomas Savery in 1698, and its successor, the Newcomen steam engine, were not very efficient. They wasted vast amounts of energy simply heating up and cooling down again. But they did show that it was possible to harness the power of steam to do useful work. So when James Watt got his hands on one of these Newcomen engines in 1763, he believed he could do better. The question is, how? To understand how he did it, we need to understand how the Newcomen engine worked. There are two key parts to the Newcomen engine, the cylinder and the condenser. Both are essentially hollow chambers, but the way they work together is quite ingenious. First, water is boiled inside the cylinder, creating pressure, which pushes a piston out. Then, as the piston moves outward, a valve opens, allowing air to rush into the cylinder and push the piston back in. During this process, some of the water vapor condenses on the cool piston head and is pushed into the condenser as a liquid. Inside the condenser, the remaining water vapor is cooled and turned into liquid by the surrounding cold air. The condensed water then flows back into the cylinder through a pipe, where it collects under the piston and heats up until it turns back into steam, ready to start the process all over again. This arrangement, however, proved to be incredibly inefficient. That's because the Newcomen engine doesn't keep the cylinder and condenser separate. Instead, the entire device serves double duty as both, forcing the engine to constantly heat and cool down again. Each time the engine takes in air, it sucks in cold outside air, which cools the cylinder. And each time the piston moves outward, it carries with it some hot steam from the cylinder into the condenser, heating it up. This constant back and forth between hot and cold made the Newcomen engine sluggish and wasteful, though it was good enough for pumping water out of mines, a task that didn't require much precision anyway. For any more complicated job, however, Watt knew the cylinder needed to stay hot and the condenser needed to stay cool. This insight was the first step toward the development of the modern steam engine. In 1765, just 2 years after he took apart his first Newcomen engine, Watt patented his separate condenser. It consisted of a cylinder and a condenser, exactly as he envisioned. Not only did this design make the engine far more efficient, it simplified its operation as well. The hot and cold portions no longer had to be integrated, meaning that the operator could focus solely on maintaining a steady supply of heat to the cylinder and removing condensed water from the condenser. With those two tasks taken care of, the engine would run smoothly with little attention required. But even this improved engine was still too weak to power anything more substantial than a water pump or an air pump, a fact that frustrated Watt immensely. His dream was to create a steam engine powerful enough to replace the manpower that drove most machinery at the time, or even the horsepower that drove many textile mills. So he set to work improving his invention further, focusing on the output shaft. The problem, of course, was that the piston moved back and forth, while shafts typically rotate. To solve this, Watt needed to find a way to convert the reciprocating or back and forth motion of the piston into rotary motion or circular motion. After years of tinkering, he came up with a clever solution. He placed 2 pistons in a single cylinder, one above the other, connected to a crank by connecting rods. When the top piston moved downward, it pulled the connecting rod up, turning the crank in a clockwise direction. When the bottom piston moved downward, it pushed the connecting rod down, turning the crank counterclockwise. By offsetting the pistons like this, Watt was able to create a continuous rotation. He patented this invention in 1781, and it immediately made the steam engine far more useful because now it could power machinery that relied on rotary motion like spinning wheels and looms. Suddenly, factories and textile mills were a viable option. However, Watt still hadn't achieved his goal of replacing human or animal power. His rotary engine was more versatile, but it was still lacking in power. At the same time, though, he was also aware that there was a limit to how much power he could generate without subjecting the engine to enormous pressures. The strength of the steam pressure depended on the temperature, and the higher the temperature, the greater the risk of explosion. So Watt intentionally limited his engine to low pressures, which stunted its growth. Undeterred, he continued working on new ways to improve his engine. One such improvement was his double-acting engine, patented in 1782. This version of the engine featured a second piston that moved upward as the first moved down, increasing the engine's power. However, the 2 pistons shared a common connecting rod, meaning they both moved in the same direction. This made it harder to turn the crankshaft and therefore less efficient. Still, this was another step closer to Watt's goal. In 1784, he patented another major improvement, the parallel motion mechanism. This system used a complex linkage of bars and sliders to transform the back and forth motion of the piston into smooth, even rotations of the crankshaft. This innovation eliminated the jerky starts and stops of his earlier designs, making his engine smoother and more efficient than ever before. It finally gave him the power he desired, allowing him to tap into the immense energy contained within heated steam without fear of explosion. These final improvements proved to be the most important to Watt's legacy. The increased efficiency not only helped him gain wider recognition, but it also allowed the steam engine to fulfill its true potential, powering machines, vehicles, and factories to unprecedented levels. It marked a turning point in history. Suddenly, previously impossible feats became not only possible, but commonplace. Factories once driven by water wheels could now operate anywhere. Mines could be pumped dry. Entire cities could be illuminated with gaslights powered by steam engines. As impressive as these developments were, though, Watt wasn't the only person tinkering with steam engines. In 1800, Richard Trevithick, an engineer from Cornwall, England, unveiled his high-pressure engine. Unlike Watt's relatively small low-pressure engine, Trevithick's engine operated at much higher pressures and temperatures, which allowed it to generate much more power in a much smaller space. This breakthrough led to the development of compact, powerful locomotives and steamships, ushering in a new era of transportation and travel. And just 4 years later, Trevithick patented the first steam locomotive, which ran successfully along a level stretch of railroad track in Wales. Though early locomotives like this were limited to flat terrain and weren't commercially successful until several decades later, they marked an important step forward nonetheless. The possibility of steam-powered transportation captured the public imagination, leading to a boom in related inventions and experimentation. Soon, inventors around the world were working to improve upon Trevithick's design, striving to create the fastest, most efficient locomotive. Meanwhile, Watt continued to refine his own engine, although nothing he developed afterward matched the impact of his earlier innovations. In 1804, he co-founded the Birmingham and Liverpool Railway, one of England's first railroads, which unfortunately never turned a profit. A few years later, in 1819, he died at the age of 65. Neither man lived to see the full impact of their inventions. But if they had, they might have been surprised to learn that their greatest creations were destined to roam the land and sail the seas. Now, James Watt is often given sole credit for inventing the steam engine, but that's not entirely accurate. In reality, he made a series of improvements to existing designs that transformed the steam engine into a powerful, efficient machine that could be used for almost anything. What's clear, however, is that Watt's name should be remembered alongside those who first conceived of the steam engine, for without his improvements, it might have remained a mere curiosity. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and leave a comment below to let us know what you think. And as always, thank you for watching.